We'll see.
Go ahead and keep talking. I will start this in a second.
Okay.
I suppose.
Everybody can see this, okay?
Yes.
Who's
Okay.
Yossi?
Well, I don't know. Yossi's here, but he's kind of sitting in the background a little bit, but that's okay. So what we're going to do today is this is a little bit of my summer last year, and it was over in Europe for 3 months, and then went to Croatia, and you saw the Croatia trip a couple of weeks ago. So this presentation is kind of a condensation of the 3 months of being in Europe. So it's the Netherlands. We ended up going to Lake Como, and obviously Yossi came to visit, which was a lot of fun. So let me start here. This is how you arrive. This is the Schiphol airport, one of my favorite airports in the world, because what you have, you arrive in the Netherlands, and you can kind of see in the background there, you grab your luggage and you can walk over to this entrance, which allows you to go down the escalator to the train. So you get off your airplane, you take your luggage, get your luggage, and you just move your cart over to where the train station is. And from there, you can literally go anywhere in the world, or anywhere in Europe, excuse me. Just an interesting, just a quick picture of the airport. So here are Anne and I arriving the very first day on the boat, and you can see our luggage sitting there, all strapped and ready to go. Here we are on the boat that evening, and you can see what terrible surroundings we have to endure when we arrive. This is the town of Snake, which is in the Netherlands, where Bernd is from. It's just a really pretty area. As the evening goes, one of the Dutch boats goes by, a typical, very typical Dutch boat. This is called you'll see him again later on, called a scoochie. And this is the type of boat that the Dutch have been using for the last 150 years or so. It's a very flat bottom sailing boat. And if you notice on the sides of it, it has these big boards. They call them swords, and there's a Dutch name for it. Bernd, maybe you know it, but
yes, you mentioned it right. We call them swords, and
yeah.
the function is, of course, to stabilize the boat, because it doesn't has how do you say it, a keel. It doesn't have a sword on the other side. It's we call them platbodem.
Yeah.
And
Anyways,
a flat bottom ship, is it?
right. The big thing here is when the sails are up and it leans over, you don't want the boat to tip. And an American or a European style boat, generally you have a keel, but this does not. Anyway, continue on. Here is Bernd, who is on the call right now. This is his house, a beautiful Dutch house. And when we first met him, he was sitting in front of this house drinking wine. And we pulled up with our boat, and he recognized our American flag. And anyway, one thing led to another. So here is parked in front of his house, how we first met him. This is a typical anchorage in the Netherlands on the canals. You can see the cities when they built them, the housing and the boats are very integrated. You can see the black bar on the other side of our boat, and that's how you connect to it. And the blue box on your left there is you plug in and you have power. So that, and then the city man comes around and charges you typically around 15 to 20 euros a night to spend the night. So this is obviously my wife in the middle of this town called Snake. Again, the same type of downtown area where you have the canals that go through the downtown, and the boats connect to the sides, and you go off and have your meals or walk around town.
Mhm. This place we call the Watergate. And well, you have a history with that word Watergate. So we have our own Watergate.
If you look to the right side of Ann there, you can see this tower or bridge we're standing on was built in the 1400s. And these were areas that they would shoot out of. You can see to the right side of Ann, but it's a very old town. Now here we have left Snake, and we're now going to another little town called Ilst. And Ilst, this is more of the traditional canal of what it originally looked like. You can see the houses on either side with a front area. And this front lawn area originally were garden areas, so the people would garden in front. And like in Bernd's house, they took that garden area away many years ago. So Ilst is another one of these spectacularly beautiful towns, but you can see the little waterways going around it. Leaving Ilst, we went across, and another, and you'll see a lot of Dutch castles. This is called the Radboud Castle, and it's in a town called Mendenblik.
Yeah, Medemblik. Medemblik.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A little correction here.
You're welcome.
Okay. It goes back to the 1288 is when they first built this, but it's a beautiful castle, really well restored. So Ann and I decided after a few days, we were heading towards Amsterdam, that we would go on a side trip, and my cousin Sabine had invited us down to her new house in Lake Como. So here we are in the Amsterdam train station, and you can see the train.
Anything like that here.
Yeah, this is called the ICE, or the what is it abbreviated, Bernd? Intercity Express. There it is.
Yes, that it must be, and it's very fast, about 200 kilometers an hour.
Right.
Wow.
It's a fast way to get around. The only problem is that they like to go on strikes in that part of the world and cause problems. So Ann and I jumped aboard, and we were heading south to visit Sabine here. And this is now, we have arrived at her house after the train, and this is just a very nice outing. Remember this, Sabine?
No.
Well, I didn't Photoshop you in there, but anyway, so we stopped at
Our house, not in Bolivia. I was just thinking, this is not in Italy. Yeah, okay, yeah, I remember this.
Not yet, not yet. This is Sabine's house, and so we arrived, and she is so smart that there's a puzzle called a Ravensburger puzzle, which is from the town. She's from Ravensburg, and normally people do 100 pieces, 500 pieces, 800 piece puzzle. Well, she is doing a 9,000 piece puzzle, and this is half of the puzzle she was working on. Right, Sabine?
Yeah, the other half was already done, and this is not because I don't have anything to do, but that was my thing during COVID when we couldn't go out. So it's kind of not really progressing at the moment.
So we left Sabina's house, and we're going in her car. This is her husband, Rolf, and we're now putting a little bit of benzene in, because everything there is by the liter. And so the pricing is, like you can see it there, 184 per liter. Well, that's times 4. So, it's a little dear in cost. So we're now driving towards Lake Como, and this is a little stop. And this is in Switzerland, Sabine, right?
Yes, Switzerland. It's in Sillis.
This was one of our stops, a typical Swiss village, and beautiful little homes, all exceptionally well taken care of. So from here, we now arrive in Lake Como, and this was a house Sabine bought about 3 or 4 years ago, isn't it, Sabine?
Yep. 2019.
Yep, it's so this is an older farmhouse, but extremely comfortable, extremely typical, and extremely just amazing. So the view it has, here is the view. Okay, so the house, farmhouse overlooks Lake Como. So you wake up, Sabina wakes up here in the summertime, in the morning time, with a beautiful glass of cup of coffee and overlooking Lake Como.
Right.
You were in La Como, right?
This is part of her outside sitting area in the morning time with your cup of coffee. You look out at Lake Como, have dinner here or whatever. It's just a spectacular place.
Beautiful.
My wife, Sabina, made a wonderful Italian. Well, how would you call that, Sabina?
Antipasti.
Antipasta dinner. Is the inside of her place, you can see the fireplace that is no longer functional, but
Look at the refrigerator.
there's my wife, her husband. They had just put on their new shawls, trying them out. So from this area in Lake Como, from her house, you look across, and what you see across there, you're going to see in a second, is Versace's house. This yellow house down by the water is where he lived until he was murdered in 1997. The place was originally built by an Englishman on Lake Como. So this is the house. Versace's called Villa Fontanella, and it was originally built in 1800s. It's currently owned by a Russian restaurateur. He bought it in 2008 for 33 million euros. So I'm sure it was not, he didn't work by the hour to make his money, but anyway, beautiful house across the way from Sabina's place.
Buy the house like that, we can buy it.
Here we are on the Versace's house looking back at Sabina's. I took this off the internet just to show you what the other side of the lake looks like. So that afternoon, or a couple of days later, we ended up going up into Lake Como. Sabina, what's the name of the town here?
This is Torno. It's called Torno.
Okay, so we ended up getting onto a ferry. Before that, obviously, we had to have a little bit of something to drink and to eat. It's just a wonderful place. So we went up the lake, and as we're going up the lake, this is a picture of George Clooney's house, the little yellow house down by the waterway there. It's a 22-room, 18th century house called Villa Oleander is what they call it. But you can see what a beautiful place. As we go up the lake, up Lake Como, here you start to see another villa. Tell me again, Sabine, it's about
Paniello.
Okay, she has much better pronunciation. It was used originally when they used it to film Star Wars, Casino Royale. It's just a beautiful estate on Lake Como. So as we go further up the lake, we're now coming up to the village called Bellagio, which everybody knows. It's a beautiful little Italian village. So as you get off, you can start to see the throngs of tourists who also want to come to the Villa Bellagio or down to the Bellagio. So Sabina knew of a restaurant on the other side of the town. So we ended up going over to a restaurant. this is right off the restaurant as we're looking out into the lake at Lake Como. People swimming. So here we have Sabine, who decided she must go for a swim also. So typical boat going by, an Italian cruiser. So after Ann and I left Lake Como, we ended up obviously heading down to Milan, and everybody has to go see the Duomo, which is the old cathedral in Milan. And it was originally started in 1386.
Beautiful too.
Cleaned it.
Yeah.
When was it finished?
When was it finished? That's a good question. I don't know. Does anybody?
Just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, it took a long time to finish. I mean, it
I'll
wasn't.
bet, I'll bet.
Shopping center there.
Yeah.
We
A
went,
little, everybody has to go shopping. You can see my wife in the middle of all the throngs of people shopping in
Yeah.
Milan. But anyway, we left Milan, back to Amsterdam. Here she is now, my wife, at a restaurant outside of Amsterdam. We arrived. One of the interesting things that they do here, if you have a boat and you decide you want to come alongside the restaurant, you just tie on and the waitress comes out and gives you whatever you want, beer, wine, dinner, whatever. It's a very civil way from if you want to go from the other side of the river in Amsterdam to this side and have a nice evening out with your friends. You don't have to even leave your boat.
Do they come out on roller skates too?
Nope. Okay, this is looking from where we are right now on one side of the river, and this is what's called Central Station. So anybody who's been to Amsterdam has seen this. This is where all the trains come in and the boats come in and the cruise ships come in, but it's called Central Station. So my other cousins came by with their 3 kids. And so you can imagine having 3 kids. This is Carlo and Pepe excited about being on my boat. So we took them out, but within a couple of hours, they're asleep on the front of the boat. It was a very warm afternoon, but it was great. They have a daughter, Felicia. She was the queen of the afternoon, but they left after a couple of days because I can only deal with small children for so long.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then we had the next person arrive, and that was Yossi.
What kind of shirt did you have on? Good grief.
So
You're on drugs or something.
well, no, we after he'd flown over, we picked him up on the other side, and so we're in a drugstore, so we're getting some sandwiches, and so Yossi, we had to leave the boat, and so I took Yossi across into Amsterdam. And this is one of the first things he gets to see is the amount of bicycles there are in Amsterdam. You can see on the right-hand side there, it's just unbelievable amount of bikes.
It's nothing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so it's
How would you even find your bike?
Whoa.
so here it is. I mean, the
gosh.
biggest problem they have in Amsterdam is when somebody's been drinking, grabs somebody else's bicycle, goes for a ride, and they kicks the bike into the canals in the evening time. But anyway, the bicycles are crazy. These are your typical canals in Amsterdam.
Oh my gosh.
Just a great place to walk around. Most of these boats are secured to the side and they don't move. It's a very prestigious thing to have a boat in Amsterdam and tied up.
A lot of people live on their boats there too, don't they?
Yes, they do,
Yes.
Scott. Yep. And so there's all different types of boats on the canals. But like I said, rarely do they move. Okay, Yossi and I had to go clothing shopping because we had to redress Yossi, but right, Yossi?
Yeah,
You look like the well-dressed tourist there, Yossi.
So here, this was another wonderful building that we saw. I mean, you can see, I can't remember the year, but it's a very old Dutch building. You can see it almost leaning on each other to support itself. Yossi, any input you can give is appreciated.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just wondering, this is not the house by the hotel that we saw that is tilting on the side.
No, no. So here is, you know, we,
That shoe. Like a little kid.
well, he
Wears some socks, yeah.
he had no grandkids, he had no wife, he was by himself, and so he could be a little kid.
Those new hiking shoes, Yossi?
Yeah. So Yossi and I left Amsterdam.
Was that Yossi's hiking boots?
Yes, those are
Yossi's
definitely
hiking
Yossi's hiking boots.
You gotta wear those on Tuesdays, Yossi.
Not gonna
So after leaving Amsterdam, we jumped on. Obviously, we're on the boat now. We're now heading down into the Netherlands a little bit, and this is our first lock that Yossi has actually gone through, and so you can see this is a separation of basically of what is very salty water, because the Dutch do not want a lot of the salt water intruding into the canals. So these canals, this canal especially, doesn't open very often. It has many times it stays closed for long periods of time, but we had to wait for it to open. You can see the green light there. That's how you know that as a boater you can go in. So as we're coming out of this canal, you can see on the other side, there's another large tanker coming into our canal. So as we leave, the next one comes in. So we're now we're leaving and we're now heading towards a town called Haarlem, which is in the southern part of the southern part of Amsterdam. It's actually connected. And these next few shots are to give you a flavor of how people live. These are obviously the newer homes, but if you notice, everybody has a boat. You know, very boating oriented. So if you have a house there, you just tie your boat up to the front if you can, but it's very easy to get around.
These modern houses are built on concrete piles. You have to imagine in the center of Amsterdam, in the old city, the houses are built on wooden piles, and
Right down after-
because of the heat in the summer, the groundwater is going down, and the poles don't stand in the water anymore, so they will rot, and that's very dangerous for the houses. These new houses don't have that problem, but the old cities all have these problems in the Netherlands. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that people forget about the Netherlands is basically a delta, right? It's the big rivers of Europe all flowing into the ocean. And so the Dutch have always had to figure out how to live with water.
And most cities are built under sea level.
Right.
Not a good.
You're going to see. So here we are now in Haarlem. This is just a really beautiful town. Not enough people visit it. I think it's sometimes a little more interesting than even Amsterdam is. So you can see we come into the town again, like before, we tie to the wall. You can see my boat there on the right. You tie to the wall, you plug into the electricity, you pay them $20 a day or whatever. It's very minimal in cost, but you have your surroundings. Then you can walk into town, have dinner or whatever. But it's a beautiful town. That's what it looks like from. You can see me sitting there. Yossi took this picture, obviously. It's just a beautiful Dutch community. One of these buildings that the Dutch do, and it's such a nice blend of using the old architecture and adding new to it. This is now in front of the church in Amsterdam, excuse me, in Haarlem. And I can't remember, Ben, do you know the name of the church? I don't.
I don't know the
No,
name.
Okay, no problem. But anyway, it's an old courtyard area, and Yossi and I in front of it.
Harlem in New York, must have been the Dutch.
Yeah. This is.
Well, this town of Haarlem, I mean, the Americans took a lot of the Dutch names, like Harlem is Harlem in New York, right? And right near this town is another town called Brooklyn, right? But it's spelled differently. But we took the name Brooklyn and we changed it and called it Brooklyn. Anyway, but Harlem, it comes, this is the original Harlem. There's a city hall, the old city hall. You can see the old architecture. It's just, it's staggering the effort that they put into their architecture.
Wonder how much of this might have been damaged during World War II.
It was not, because if you remember, the Germans first took Rotterdam and bombed it to the point where they asked them, do you give up? Because if you didn't give up, the next town was going to be Utrecht that we take out. So the majority of the Netherlands didn't get heavily bombed because the Dutch quickly said, okay, we give up. So it was primarily Rotterdam that was bombed very heavily. So this town, again, because you have a waterway going through it, this is an old bridge. It's called the Milk Bridge or Melkenburg Bridge. It was a cast iron bridge, and it had to open for us to go through, if you remember, you'll see it, but it's a cast iron bridge. There is Yossi and Anne standing on the bridge. And in the background, you can see the boat, and to the left is the beginning of the town of Haarlem.
Larry, is this bridge open?
Yes.
It's a swing.
It's what they call a swing bridge, Eric.
Yes.
And it's one of the few swing bridges that is shorter on one side than the other. You can see the side where the boats pass is wide. So when it swings to the other side. But yeah, it rotates.
How do you get them to open it for you?
There's one of two ways. The majority of the bridges are manned. The Dutch have a lot of people that man these bridges, or they have cameras that see the boat coming. So if the boat is coming, they have lights. Either there will be red or green, letting the boater know it's time to go through or it's time to wait. But they're manned either by people that will open it, or a camera that sees you coming, or you call the person up on a VHF on a radio. So it was an interesting car. We walked over to I don't remember, it was a shopping area, and we saw this itty bitty little car, and we come to find out the Dutch, and I didn't know this, but this is a car that they allow on the bicycle paths. It was designed to be able to be small enough to drive on bicycle routes and to be able to park in where bicycles park.
That's not right. Yeah.
Larry, I think this car was a electrical car.
Yes. Yeah, electric car.
And we met the lady that was riding it. It was quite big, and this one was small.
Yeah. It was very interesting to see this, right?
Like some of the ones we have here.
Yeah, but it's just the fact that they let them go on the bicycle paths. I mean, that's the incredible part. So, anyway.
Maximum speed about 45 kilometers an hour.
Oh, really? Okay.
And probably you don't need a driving license for it.
You don't need a driver's license.
Really?
Driver's license. No.
Well,
hate to be a biker.
Does this car have an engine, or do you pedal it?
Does it have an engine or do you pedal it?
It's probably a kind of a Flintstone car.
It was so interesting because it rains a lot in the Netherlands, obviously. So I'd have one of these because if you're
Yeah.
going to go down, go buy your groceries, far nicer to do that than a bicycle, right?
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, so there's the boat again. Now, Jim, somebody just asked me to describe the boat a little bit more, and what it is. This the boat we're tied up here in Haarlem. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath boat with a living room area, very comfortable. So this is where we live in the summertime as we're traveling around. But this is basically a motor home on the water, is what it is. But very
That's
comfortable.
where he gets navigates.
It's
Where does it live? Where does it
where
live
does it
during the
live?
year?
In the wintertime right now, when I leave, it stays inside of a warehouse. I have it taken out of the water and it's put inside of a warehouse. And so that if it gets 5 degrees above zero, the heaters kick in, so it keeps the boat warm and keeps it out of the weather for 9 months of the year. So I get to use it 3 months, but I have to pay for 12 months. So,
Oh, yeah.
Where's the warehouse?
in a town called Snake, Sneek. It's in an area called Friesland, which is the northern part of the Netherlands. It's I know Jim Dietz is thinking his brain, how much does it cost? So it costs about $500 a month for heated indoor storage.
Jeez.
That's good. That's
Yeah, isn't
really
that good, Jim?
Yeah, that's
compared to
really
the-
good.
Yeah,
That's
compared
really
to the
good.
Northwest, I mean, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of motor or motors are there?
the equipment is Vetus, Vetus, Vetus Deutsch. It's a Dutch engine. It's 140 horsepower engine. Because on the canals of Europe, you can't go very fast. They limit you basically to around 7 miles an hour, right? And so you don't need a big engine. Like the boat I had in the Northwest, I had a 450 horsepower engine in it,
Jeez.
but it was just crazy. And it would burn, the other boat would burn 16 liters an hour. This burns about 3 to 4 liters an hour. So it's much more cost effective to run.
So I guess
Do
you
you
can't
have to
keep
clean
going
the
around.
boat? Do you have to clean the hull?
No, interesting, Joe, you do not, because in California, the boats, because you're in the sunshine, warm water, they get lots of algae. Here, because I only use it for 3 months, it gets cleaned at the end of the season, but during the season, you don't have to clean it. Because again, you're also, one other thing, you're in fresh water, right? In British Columbia, you were in salt water. Right, so this all being freshwater, the algae doesn't grow as fast. So here in Haarlem, there's an interesting museum. I'm going to just talk about real quick that Yossi and I went to. It's called the Peter Teller Museum, and in the 1778 is when it was founded. And this guy Peter Teller turned out to be a wealthy person at one time. Anyway, he started this museum, and this museum is a collection of old, what am I trying to say? Old inventions. So as you go into the museum, you start to see all of these. How did electricity start? How did amplification of sound start? These were all the original prototypes of people who designed things. This was the original battery. They were called Leyden jars, but this was static electricity transferred into those jars. The engineers in the group will be able to understand this better than I, who don't.
Yeah, it was very fascinating. Very, very fascinating. But static electricity, to build equipment for static electricity is more complicated than doing just basic electronics.
Right. So here's another one. This is the early, how did you amplify sound? This was the sound mix. So this man, Peter Leiden, got so many of these inventions, early inventions, because we think of sound mixers as nothing, but this is the early sound mixer. So the museum was full of either prehistoric bones, old literature, but all old inventions. It's a spectacular.
Barry, go back to the one with the sound. I just want to say something. The sound is usually, when you talk, is many frequencies combined together, usually between 3 kilohertz to 20 kilohertz. And he was able to make, when you look at these black things, each one of them was a very a solid frequency, and then he combined them together to make the sound.
We take this stuff for granted, but when you think about how did it start? Well, this museum was all full of these original inventions, and it's a phenomenal museum. I mean, if anybody even gets close to Amsterdam, you should have a chance to go to Haarlem and go see this museum, because it's so interesting. So we now are leaving Haarlem. And again, as you start to see along the canals, people living, there are all these houses along the canals. And these are some of the houses, you don't realize how beautiful these people live. I mean, right up to the waterway, spectacular houses. And many of these houses are the old merchants and the existing merchants, people who worked in Amsterdam, because this was so close by. Very interesting architecture, but in very, very good quality of life that they have.
Is that a thatch roof on that one house?
It is, Steve, it is.
Yeah, gotta be.
Do the homes need sump pumps or for water intrusion, or that it doesn't happen, or what?
Barrett, you're far better telling them that. Tell me.
The houses themselves don't have pumps. No, we have a very ingenious water management system, and it keeps the water level always on the same level.
The whole of the Netherlands managing water. And this is something that's really interesting. This level of water is so managed that you cannot have 4 inches more water, or you can have less, but you can't have more, because every one of these boats has to go underneath a fixed bridge. And so if they allowed more water to come in the wintertime, the boats couldn't go underneath the bridges because they'd smack into the bridges. So their water management is phenomenal.
So they
I
don't
would
have.
assume that means that they'll be able to adjust for the rising ocean levels.
Yes.
Well, that is a problem. The sweet water becomes more and more salt water, and that is, of course, you understand that, very bad for agriculture. And for the fish, sweetwater fish, and and so on. The climate change causes rising of the sea level much faster as we thought. Well, we thought about 20 centimeters in a century. Well, it will be 40 at least.
Right, the first people that are going to feel it are the Dutch.
Yes, and it will come so far that we have to learn not to fight the water, but to live again with the water. Right. You have, if you can't beat it, you have to join it. You know it. Huh?
Right. So here we're just going along and you can see some of the views of you see of the countryside as you go through these canals, you know. I mean, it goes from Harlem, which is very city oriented, and then all of a sudden you get these spectacularly beautiful countrysides. So one of the things as we went along with the boat, we saw this dock. And so we thought, okay, let's just stop here. So we stopped and pulled in, and Yossi we went across the street, looking back. You can see the bicycle path in the front there, but boats in the background. So there we found a restaurant.
Oh, how
And
nice.
so this was one of our favorite places just to hang out, you know, always to try to find is restaurants on the side of the canals. So Yossi, this was one of your favorite breakfasts.
Yeah, that was the best pancake in the world. You know, not sweet, cooked together with the honey. It was unbelievable.
Yep. So we had breakfast here because we saw this restaurant, and then right next to the restaurant, we didn't even know this was here. There is a pumping station, and so we're going to now walk through this pumping station real quick, and it's called the Cruquius. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but it was built in 1751, and it was in use up until 1933. So what this is, you can see these arms coming out of the center of it. You're now going to see the water that they're pumping from the lower area out, and attached to those arms
Buckets?
are these pistons that are probably, I don't know, 10 feet in diameter. They're huge. And so these arms go up and down at different times to draw water out from the lower area and pump it into the upper area. I mean, it's staggering what they were able to do here.
So this is not an operation anymore then, Barry, or?
No, they ran it for us when Yossi and I were there. There was a lady that was in there, and she said, "Would you like to see it run?" Well, you know, as a Pope Catholic, of course, we want to see it run. So she turned it on, and these pistons would go up and down and pump.
So what do they use now then?
They have much simpler pumps, which are much stronger because the technology have changed.
Oh.
But I think some of those are still in operation, still keeping.
Okay.
So the inside of this, right? You can see the mechanisms that are the hydraulic pumping. And this is what it's doing. This is the mechanism inside that all of those arms are connected to, that goes up and down. And this mechanism is, I'm not exaggerating, probably 20 feet in diameter. It's just huge. And it takes these arms and moves them up and down, so it pumps the water. I mean, it's staggering.
What were
Anyway,
they, Barry, what were they using for power in the 1700s?
Jim, I don't know. That's a good question. My guess is steam, but I don't know this.
Well, they're all steam machines, of course, and they all started with coal, and after the coal, the heavy, how do you say it, fuel oil, and that's a very bad oil for the environment. To start a machine, it takes you 24 hours to start up the whole machine, and we keep them on hand. So we have, of course, all the Netherlands have very modern electric pump systems, but when the rain is too much, then we have our old steam pump machines on hand. It's yeah, and then
Anyway.
it takes you 24 hours to get it in function. And if our steam machine in Lemmer is operating, it can pump in one day, all the Snake Lake, well, it's a huge lake, it's dry.
So
That's amazing.
It was an interesting side trip that we didn't even know was there. So we now are leaving here. So I put Yossi at the helm so he could drive. And you know, all he has to do is watch the traffic and keep it right, Yossi.
Yeah.
So here we as the evening went on, we had to find a parking space, and so we parked along the side of the canal here. You can see how beautiful it is, just a park. And Yossi took this picture. It was one of my favorite pictures all summer because the sun was just going down, and just a spectacular place. Remember this picture, Yossi?
Yeah, yeah.
Reflection.
Yeah, it was just a really pretty picture.
We were really lucky that the lighting was so set for us. Yeah.
Yep. Anyway, so as we go up the canal again, it's now lunchtime, and so we find another little place on the side, a restaurant, so you can see the boat in the background. So we pull the boat in, and we walk across the street and have lunch. Just a wonderful place to have lunch. So as we continue up the canals, and this I'm showing this a little bit just to give you a feel. The Dutch have these fields, open fields you can see in the background, and they have made these little camping areas. So all along the waterways. So in the summertime, you can drive your car in, bring your family and all the food and everything, and then bring your boat in, and you can fish and hang out. But their quality of life on this kind of on the waterways is just phenomenal. So Steve asked about a thatched hut. This was as we were walking, Yossi and I were walking around, we saw this house, and the house, obviously thatched hut, but what caught our attention, if you look in the top there above that, is the man had built a platform on top of this tree for the storks, and there were storks living behind the house on top of the tree.
Oh, yeah.
So again, we had to find a place to spend the night, and we found this little harbor we pulled into, and this was a very tough little harbor to get into. Yossi will remember, I think we had maybe 6-8 inches on either side of the boat to get in there. But so this is the town where we're in now. It's called Leiden, Leiden. It's known for the Leiden University, which is the Netherlands' oldest university, dating back to 1575. This was also the home of Rembrandt, where he was from. But this town of Leiden is just a wonderful town if you ever have a chance to visit. The city hall, which is just, you know, I mean, the architecture, the old architecture is just spectacular.
I thought there was a picture over there when you were up on the top that I took.
Well, I'm coming down the stairs here.
Yeah, here you're coming down the stairs, right?
Yep, you took that one, Yossi. Yep. There's a theater in Leiden. So after Leiden, we left, and the next town we pulled into, we found this little area to pull over to the side, was a place called Zwammerdam, which nobody's ever heard of, except that Zwammerdam, just a little bit of history here. This is an old picture I took, and this is the old Rhine River. And the Rhine was the point where it separated the barbarians from the Romans. And so the Romans built all along the Rhine River, called the Limes line. But anyway, they built these little castles, and they would come up and down the Rhine River, and these areas where I took this picture off the internet. This was obviously, but this was what the town of Zwammerdam originally looked like. It was a central point on the Rhine River where the Romans would come, and they built these forts to be able to control the area. But it was called the LIMES Lime Line, and it cuts all the way through Europe from England all the way
Sure
through.
doesn't look like that today.
No, well, okay, what it looks like today, that is the fort.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And underneath that are the remnants of that fort.
Yeah.
But you can see where the Rhine River originally was, and now they have moved it obviously away and canaled it and controlled the water flow. But this is what it looks like today. It was just historically, it was so interesting for us.
Quite a difference.
Yep. It's a typical little house again in Swammerdam, in this little town.
Nice
I mean, the scenery is just spectacular. Here we are again in Swammerdam. We're just leaving. So we're now going to another town, and this town is called Warden, which doesn't mean anything to you, but you'll start to understand in a few minutes. But a lot of these towns were built into configuration. If you look in a star configuration, you can see the town, because what they were doing, they had the original little town in the middle, water all around it, and they were they had cannons on every one of these corners and people to shoot out at. So if you were attacking, but anyway, the town of Warden is a cute, really cute town. So we came in on the upper area. You're going to see a couple of pictures. Upper area here into the town, what's called De Haven, which means the harbor.
Kind of looks like an island.
Yeah, that's the town. So in the town here, again, we went out to dinner. Obviously, this was an Argentinian place that we went to eat at. Another one
They
of these.
they had the best sauce around, and I think we asked them to give us some extra one, and then we ate those sauce for a few more days.
Yeah.
Both.
And here we are in Warden again. Warden, we saw one of these little cute electrified, almost scooters, but so in Warden, so this is part of the downtown Warden area. This is a 16th century city hall. And if you notice real quickly on the bottom right, if you look at the corner of the building, you'll see a platform there. And above the platform, you'll see some chains hanging. What that was, the man explained to us in the 16th, 17th, 1800s. If you had committed a crime or done something, they would stand you on that platform 6-8 feet off the ground and would chain you to it. And you would be up there for a day or 2 days. So people, as they're walking by, could throw whatever they wanted at you for your crime. But anyway, they would only do this to men because you don't put a woman up on a platform 6-8 feet off the ground. So anyway, it was an interesting thing. So this just more pictures of Warden. It's just again all separated by water. The churches, the castles, a water tower that they've now turned into a house.
Really?
This was an interesting windmill in Warden, and it's a very old one. This goes back to 1755. It was originally only wind driven, but in 1877 they made it into a steam driven, and then in 1901 they turned it into a gas turbine driven windmill. This inside of it, they still had the gas turbine that was running, and they still run it with the gas turbines once in a while.
Why would you
So, okay, on this windmill, one of the things I never understood until you get closer to these windmills, you obviously have to put the blades into the wind, and so how do you move it? You've got a wheel on one side and it hooks onto the decks to hold it in place. But when you want to move it, you unhook the mechanism and then the wheel, you move it into the wind. I mean, it's a piece of engineering that is beyond understanding in how they did it in that time period. So here's some of the mechanism inside, because when they built this in the 1800s, it was obviously built out of wood and still functioning. And this is an old grist mill, you know, where they would grind flour. But you look at these mechanisms, I mean, to go get a tree and cut it out and design it. I mean, here's a little bit to give you an overview. The top part is where the windmill, where the wind drives the mechanism. And then, as you know, an engineer would appreciate this more than I would, all of the mechanisms were wood, it all interchanged. And the end result is at the bottom where the man is, they grind the wheat, and at the same time the mechanism is harnessed so that when he has the flour full, he puts it into the bag, and then the bag it goes out to the second store. I mean, it's a piece of engineering that is just beyond anything.
Yeah, it's really amazing how they made all these things with wood, but you know, wood and wood, they have some friction, so they had ways to take some of the teeth and put new teeth in there, still working. But what was really fascinating to me in one of the places that we went, how many transmissions they had to do several things at the same time, like several grindings of different kinds of
corn, different grains.
Yeah. When you see a windmill, you have no idea how much what's inside of the inside is the most interesting part of it. So anyway, we left Warden, and here is your typical nice canal that you're cruising along in, and there's Yossi in front, obviously taking pictures.
Barry?
Yep.
Barry, how long would you how many miles would you travel on a typical day? How far apart are these beautiful places?
If you stop at every beautiful place, Jim, every 5 miles, right? You have to pick and choose, because the biggest problem that you have every day, Jim, you don't have this in the Northwest, is where are we gonna have dinner tonight? Right, so you arrive in these little towns, Jim, and first thing you got to find out is where's a good place to eat, where's you know, what's worth seeing. And we stay in these towns only until we go, okay, that's it, next town, because there's so many of them. So here we are again, free moorage. We've just ended up pulling along the side of this dock here. And just we walked around a little bit. There's Yossi walking. They have, Jim, just as a side piece, they have 4,000 different free docking spaces in the Netherlands alone.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's called socialism.
Oh, Ben, don't start again.
So anyway, here we're now in another town. This is a town called Weesp, with another typical windmill, but this one's totally different. And but it was just a beautiful building. So in Weesp, it's a really cute town. You can see the walls on the side where you tie to. Again, we're waiting for this bridge to open. You can see right on Yossi's arm, there's a red light. We're waiting for it to turn green, and then the bridge opens and you can go through. There's a little town called Weesp, and it's your typical Dutch boats. I'm sorry, I said Weesp. This is now the next town called Muden. And Muden is very interesting. You're going to see some interesting pictures. these locks you go into, and so at different times of the day, they can obviously get very busy. So this guy in front of me is basically by himself, and you can see a boat coming out of the lock. And so he's trying to maneuver so that the guy coming out of the lock can go past him, but he doesn't want to bump into the, the other large boat on the right, the black boat. So we're now in the locks, and you can see the gentleman who is by himself is tied his big boat on the left side. I tied it to the right. The lock keeper up at the top is now opening front locks, and he's letting us out. These are the locks when they're empty. Just so this town of Muden that we're viewing right now, you're going to see is right at the mouth of what's called a river called the Vecht River, which doesn't mean anything to anybody other than in the old days, in the 15, 16, 17, 1800s, when they come out of the North Sea, they would want to go into the Netherlands to trade. Well, a man in the 12th century decided that he would build a castle at the mouth of this river. And so he became the guardian of the river, and he charged a toll. So he charged so much money over the years that he built himself a castle from all the money. So this is a castle. It's called Muden Castle, right at the mouth of this river called the Vecht River. And it's
I wonder how they built foundations for these heavy castles in that ground, which had to be sort of soft.
Yeah.
Very smart engineer, Scott. A little bit of the history I was told in the Netherlands in the houses when they built them, as Ben said, they didn't use obviously concrete foundations, but they used wooden poles to go into the ground. And then they would put stones down. Then they would put cowhides down, more stones, cowhides. And so they built a foundation built on cowhides, because when there's no oxygen and the wood and the cowhides are in the water, they're not going to rot, right? Because oxygen is what makes things rot. So I don't know what they did with the castles, but in Amsterdam, that's what they did with the houses. But this castle is, tourists don't come to see this, but it's within 25 miles from Amsterdam. It's a beautiful old castle.
It's not on the beaten
Well,
path.
maybe you can go.
Right. It's a bed in the castle. So right outside the castle.
Just before you finish, I just want to mention something about the castle. The way they used to live over there, they were suspicious of the people. If somebody was by himself and he disappears for a second, they will be suspicious of him that he wants to do some harm into the castle and somehow figure out a way to take it over. So in the castle, if you want to go to the bathroom, they have to see you all the time. So it's like a hole in the wall, and you sit over there, and everybody can watch you. So when they see you, then they know that there's no harm happening. But if you disappear, then it's a problem.
Yep. So anyway, this was one of our favorite restaurants. Not a big deal, but this was right on the canal, right by the Muden Castle. So the three of us, this was one of my favorite places to have dinner. But you can see the size of the beautiful meat that Yossi's got there.
Jeez.
Yeah, beautiful piece of meat with a nice piece of cheese on top. And
so what would a meal like that cost you?
Yossi, I don't remember. Do you?
I don't know. I think that it was around the $40 or something like that.
Here's one of the big things, David, is when you get out of the tourist areas, there's no tipping.
Good.
Right. So all of a sudden that makes a big deal difference, right? And plus the Dutch don't make huge amounts of money, the majority of the population. So, people want to eat, it's got to be reasonable, and they keep everything very reasonable in cost as long as you get away from the tourist areas. So
And
this
then
was our Yossi last night. We ended up going to a town called Naarden, and Naarden, and this is I should have had this picture early, but Naarden is part of what used to protect Amsterdam. So when you go back to the 14, 1500s, huh? So these points, the little black points that you see, what those were was what's called the defense line of Amsterdam. And there were 42 forts in a 135-mile round configuration. What they were always doing was protecting Amsterdam. Amsterdam was the trade place of Europe, right? Where the trades would come in. So all of these places around here that you see the black spots were all towns that they had originally built, which was called the defense line of Amsterdam, right? So what they were defending was that the marauders, which was the French and the Spanish and whoever wanted to attack to get things. So the town we're going to now is called Naarden. And this is not my picture, but this is an aerial view of what Naarden looks like now. And you can see the configuration of when they built it, like that other town, Worden, I tried to show you, of how they built the town and the fortification around it protected by water. So here is this again, not my picture, but off the internet. Very interesting because this is what it looks like now. The town of Naarden. You can see all the.
No, please go on. I have to let the cat out. Cat wants.
And help you anyway. Yeah, it's just a very interesting town. So these are my pictures now. So we ended up, Yossi and I took the bicycle and drove around, went all around the town. But I mean, different people have built on this fortification. This is the middle what you saw before of Naarden, the city hall, beautiful architecture.
They called them the Rot House, the red house, because they were always made out of red brick.
Yep. So here is again Naarden. This would have been an entrance into Naarden. If you were wanting to get in, they had a way to open a gate or open a sluice, but just a beautiful town.
Yeah, that's where they belong.
So here is Yossi getting some exercise. We're both out riding our bicycles, which was the greatest way to get around, obviously, in the Netherlands. The town is obviously protected, and you can see if you were going to attack it by water, you'd have a hard time. And even trying to get across how they built the fortifications, you weren't going to run across this fortification to get over into town very easily. So we left Naarden because you can keep going on Naarden. This is again the countryside. We've now dropped Yossi off, and Yossi has gone back home. But now we're just continuing on, just the views of the countryside. Another great place. We spent the night, just pulled over the side. So right next to this farm, were some horses. If I can get this to work. Wrong. Okay. Were some horses. And I took this one picture real quick just to show you. There is a special horse in the Netherlands. It's called a Frisian horse, Frisin. And it's one of the more beautiful horses in the world. But they come from this area. And this was a Frisian farm of the horses.
Yep. And she looked like the queen.
Just a beautiful view. We're now in another town called Dokkum, which doesn't mean anything to you, but it was in very northern part of the Netherlands. This village of Dokkum used to be connected to the North Sea, and on high tide, they would come down the river into Dokkum to sell their fish and to sell their wares. and on outgoing tide, they would ride the current out back into the North Sea, but it's obviously now all closed off. But these pictures you're going to see is of these boats that are in Dokkum, but this is all an old fishing village. Yeah. This is again one of these wonderful Dutch boats with their swords. Obviously not down. So here we are again. This is I took this picture, put it up here just to show you some of these boats. These what are called scoochies. They're the ones that you see out there sailing. That's a day of sailing. There's a town called Harlingen we're in, again, right on the IJsselmeer, which is the open area of water. But what the Dutch have done is brought the rail, the boats, and transportation, people walking all together, which is just, I mean, I give them a huge amount of credit here. Just wonderful architecture where they've melded the old post office building to the new. This was, I thought, interesting because, you know, outside of a Dutch bar in the evening time, most guys will look for a place to pee, and they don't want you peeing on the side of the building. So the Dutch bring in these portable potties. And this one is connected to the sewer by a hose, because you can see, you know, guys coming in the evening time, coming in for a pee. And so you don't want to peeing on the buildings or the walls, so you give them a place to step up on. Anyway, the last few days, my cousin stopped by again, Sabrina and her boys. So the three of and their girl, and this is us just going out to a dinner that evening. That was Sabrina, my cousin, and her kids. And this is, we're winding it down now. We're coming to a real small little village, one of my favorites to be able to spend the night. You can see, you just cruise into this village, tie up to the side. There's a bakery that goes back to 1663. You know, I mean, it's just, you know, stuff you can, it's hard to imagine how old it is. Here's where we woke up the next day, you know, looking out of from the boat, looking out, you can see the sun coming up, what you have to wake up to. I threw this in for boaters to give you an idea, because most people don't believe me how cheap it is over there. I mean, there's my ticket to pay for. It was 12.35 euros for the night stay, 9.35, plus then they have a tourist tax of 2 euros. Anyway, it's so cheap to boat over there compared to, I know Jim and some of the boaters that are on the call right now will appreciate this stuff. I had no idea how boating in Europe is cheap. So
it's by the foot of the boat, right? I see on the left-hand side. Is that how they figure it out?
It's the length of the boat, Steve, exactly. How many meters is your boat? And how many days are you going to stay? And then how many people do you have aboard? So here we are coming into our spot to be able to leave the boat. And this is basically the end for now. So this was our a little bit of our 3 months of traveling.
How many years have you been doing this, Bert?
We bought the boat 5 years now. Yeah. So I think we have another maybe year or 2 years before we sell it.
I just want to mention one thing, Barry. You forgot to tell them about how you ditched me.
We heard about that.
For those who didn't, real quickly, Yossi and I we had made our destination. We're going up, and we come to this bridge, and the bridge says we're closed. I go, closed? When will you open? Not going to open. I'm going, this is crazy. And it would have cost me a day to go back and around where we were going. So I said to Yossi, I said, let's go to a restaurant. So we went to a restaurant, drank a beer, waited. While we were waiting, we're right there by the boat, and I see the bridge open. And I go, I thought they weren't opening. So the bridge opens, and I'm barely finishing my beer and the bridge closes again.
Oh,
So about 10 minutes later, I said, Jesus, if that bridge opens again, I'm just going to jump on the boat and I'm going to go for it. So another 15, 20 minutes later, all of a sudden I see the bridge opening again. And I said, and Yossi had gone to the bathroom and my wife was still there. And I said, I'm going to jump on the boat. So I jumped on the boat and started it. I hadn't paid the bill. And so my wife ended up paying the bill. I started the boat and Yossi wasn't back yet. Well, at that point, I said, to hell with it. The bridge is open. And I gunned it and I got through the bridge. And as I'm coming up to the bridge is closing. And now I'm on the other side of the bridge. Well, where's Yossi?
You left him in the restaurant.
We left him in the restaurant.
Obviously, you got home.
So Yossi, you finished. Where did you end up?
So, I mean, I came out of the bathroom, I see everybody is gone. My credit card is gone, everything is gone. So I figured out that he probably went, the bridge was open and he went through there. So then I had to walk all around, but it took a while because there were a lot of working being done in the